out error-free. Debugging is just the process of detecting, finding, and correcting errors in logic and syntax. Logic errors, they prevent the app from behaving as expected. And so sometimes you're going to make mistakes in your code that might lead to poor user experience. And so you're going to have to go ahead and correct those things. Or maybe different elements on the page might not act the way that you anticipate them to do, and that might be an issue with the code that you're creating, okay? Logic is just something that is mental. It's not something that you necessarily see, so it's the way that you're thinking about an issue versus the actual code itself. The actual code itself, if you have any problems there, they're known as syntax errors. Syntax errors are just simple typos in code which prevent your apps from running. So it might be like a missing semicolon or something along those lines. And you'll notice some of the errors that you could possibly make when you start experimenting and using HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript, okay? So keep those things in mind. All right, after you've debugged and tested your code, you want to make sure that you validate it as well. This is another exceptionally important step. You can head to a markup validation service that's provided by W3C in order to validate your code. All that you're doing is making sure that your code is properly interpreted by browsers, right? So if you're designing your code so that it can be platform independent, so that it can be used across a variety of browsers, then you have to make sure that it's validated, and from that you'll learn whether you need to make any changes in order to adjust inaccuracies in code or correct syntax errors. So keep those things in mind. All right, packaging apps. This is our last little bit here, if I'm not mistaken. So packaging an app is simply the process of preparing it for installation on devices or different systems, okay? If you want to package and publish an app in the Windows Store, you can use the Windows App Certification Kit. All that does is provide a report describing any problems with an app, so it's sort of another validation step. If there are problems, you clearly can go ahead and correct them and then resubmit your app through the Windows App Certification Kit and make sure that everything's working properly, okay? All right, now this is the last step, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so publishing an app. So you've gone through all this hard work of creating and developing an application. You've got to know how to publish it and where to go. There are just some really, really simple steps if you want to publish it to a marketplace for apps. For example, the Windows Store. Before publishing an app to the Windows Store, you must sign up and pay for a developer account. Paying is always kind of a bummer, but just remember how much money you can make when people download your apps. 2, you got to go through the app submission checklist to make sure that you've dotted all I's and crossed all T's. 3, you've got to capture some screenshots of unique features in your app, different things that you want people to take notice of. 4, you have other users test your app on multiple devices and platforms, exceptionally important. And finally, 5, a little bit of paperwork. You've got to include a privacy statement if your app gathers personal information or uses copywritten software, okay? So, definitely go to the Windows Store, take a look at these things, do a quick Bing search. There's a lot of information here and a whole lot more to learn, okay? I'm really excited that you're here to learn about how to develop HTML5 apps. It's just a remarkable journey that I've been able to take in learning how to develop and how to code, and I hope that you really, really enjoy it, all right? Just a quick summary of everything that we've learned here today. Talked about how to build an app, talked about the runtime environment, managing app data, and then debugging and testing, validating code, and also publishing to an app store. Thanks for joining me. Once again, I'm Cullen. See you again on Module 2. Hi, welcome back to Module 2 of HTML5 Application Development Fundamentals. I'm Cullen, and today we're going to cover how to build the user interface by using HTML5 with a special emphasis on text, graphics, and media. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our agenda. We're going to go ahead and overview what HTML is, talk about basic markup and page structure, review some of the basic text elements used in HTML5. We're going to talk about displaying graphics using the canvas and SVG tags, and then focus on how to embed media into our web pages. All right, let's get started. HTML. Hypertext Markup Language is the language used to provide structure to web pages. HTML uses tags such as P and H1 to perform this function. And so if you take a look over here in the graphic, H1 is a basic header, whereas P allows us to write paragraphs, right? Browsers read this markup language and then render the web pages that we see on screen. Throughout the 2000s, HTML 4.01 was a standard for web pages, but unfortunately it was limited in what it could provide us as users, right? A strong demand for a rich web experience, including audio, video, and interactivity, led to the development of a new HTML standard. That standard is HTML5. W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium, is a standards organization that was responsible for the development of HTML5. The standard encompasses not just HTML and its markup tags, but also cascading style sheets, JavaScript, and a couple of other different libraries that are available that we'll cover later in the course. One thing that's really important to know is that HTML5 is platform independent, which means that it can work on a variety of different browsers, and it'll always render in a very similar fashion, not always the same though. Let's talk about a couple of things that are brand new with HTML5. We've got audio and video tags. We've got the canvas element, which allows us to draw graphics on the web page. We've got media queries, which detect the type of screen that we're using, so whether we're on a smartphone or a laptop or a desktop. And then we also have new application programming interfaces, and that allows us with a quicker way to access digital and hardware resources. Finally, you might have something like geolocation, which allows us to access our latitude and longitude, our location, wherever we're walking around about town. All right, let's take a look at some of the basic markup and page structure with HTML. So like, how do we actually create a document? A tag is where it all starts. And a tag is just a basic keyword surrounded by some angle brackets. It's gonna look a little bit like these. Most tags come in pairs, right? We've got our opening tag up there at the top, and then we have our closing tag there at the bottom. So opening tags right here, closing tags right here. The difference is that the closing tag features a / in front of the keyword. A tag pair is often going to be referred to as an element, so make sure that if you hear me switch back and forth between tag and element, that you know that they're the same thing. All right, and so here you can see those tags in action. You see the opening tag, the head, and then you see the closing tag, the head, same thing, HTML, and there's our closing tag there as well. All right, so let's talk about some of the common HTML tags that you may have just seen in our last example. You've got the HTML tag, which defines the document as an HTML document. We have our head, which contains code used by the browser. This is information that we would never see if we're taking a look at a web page. Next, we've got the body, and that's actually where the content that we see on a page is located. And then you've got things like paragraphs, links, headers, images, all sorts of good stuff there. Tags are not just used alone, right? We have to use attributes in order to describe how data should be rendered on a web page. Attributes are used to provide additional information, okay? And so this might be a URL or something along those lines. Each element has a specific set of attributes that can be used with it. There are some global attributes, however, which can be used with any element. Attributes added using the syntax located below, right? So here we have our tag keyword, which is A. This is for a link. We've got our href attribute, which has a value of www.bing.com, and then our text, which would actually be the hyperlink that we would click on a page in order to go visit Bing. Creating some awesome web pages requires us to combine elements and their attributes in order to create something that's really engaging for users. When two or more elements apply to the same block of content, then we have to nest tag pairs or nest elements. Nesting is the process of simply placing one element inside of another, and here the outside element is called a parent, while the inner is called a child. You can take a look at this sentence down below here. We have, I love taking my dog for a walk. M stands for emphasis, and here we're able to emphasize the child here of love, and that's a really ugly line, so sorry about that. Within the paragraph, or just the sentence here, I love taking my dog for a walk. HTML also allows us to use some special characters. These special characters are called entities, and they include things like % signs, copyright symbols, all sorts of good stuff there. If we don't include things like entity names or special codes for these different entities, then they won't actually render on screen. Causes us some pretty big problems. Each special character is just simply, once again, reproduced by its entity name or the number code, right? The numerical code. So each entity starts with an ampersand. So these guys right here are ampersands, and they end with a semicolon. Once again, my ugly circles here. Should probably be drawing them with my finger instead of a mouse, but don't always get it right, right? All right. Next, we've got a doctype declaration. Every HTML web page includes a doctype declaration. In HTML 4.01, we had a really, really ugly doctype that involved a little bit more work and a little bit more thinking. All right. In HTML5, they've simplified the doctype declaration in order to make it a little bit easier for us to type, right? So all we have to do is type the exclamation mark doctype HTML, and all of a sudden we have identified a page or a document as an HTML document. Much, much easier than an HTML4. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some HTML5 elements in action here. I'm going to head over to WebMatrix, which is a wonderful piece of software designed by Microsoft. It's free as well, which is absolutely tremendous as far as I'm concerned. And let's go ahead and take a look here at our elements demo, right? So here we've got all these familiar tags that we just talked about, our doctype declaration, our HTML tags, our head tags, the meta tag, and then the title tag, which we didn't talk about previously. But title actually is going to provide the title, it's semantic, of our web page that you're going to see up in a tab or at the top of a browser window. Body, of course, is where all of our content's going to appear, and we create that content with a header and a simple paragraph here. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and right-click my HTML document, and I'm going to launch it in the browser and check it out. There in the tab, we see our title, HTML5 elements in action, and then we've got our header and our paragraph. So pretty easy stuff. We've created a simple web page there. Let's go ahead and exit out of our browser and head back to our presentation. All right, so let's talk about some text elements now in HTML5. We